Literature possesses the remarkable power to shape the image of our surroundings. Without experiencing love firsthand, we come to understand its depths and force through words. Though we didn't live in the past, literature allows us to envision history with clarity and emotion. Though distant from certain lands, we journey across them through the pages of stories. Through literature, we see vivid picture of thoughts and experiences in our minds. But what is the role of literature in shaping Africa's image? This is the Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa. And I am Zelalem Ibeltal, your host. Today, I'm honored to be joined by two distinguished voices of literature, Lemon Sisai and Goreti Kayumando. Very warm welcome to the Pulse of Africa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. May I start the interview by having a brief introduction of yourself? And Goreti, if I start with you, help us understand who Goreti is.
Thank you for having us. I'm a Ugandan novelist. I've published five novels now. I have founded two organizations. One is the African Writers Trust, which is an organization that brings African writers in the diaspora and writers on the continent so they can share experiences and collaborative learning. The other is called the Tubaze African Books, and this is an online bookshop that promotes and sells books by African writers to the rest of the African continent.
Mm-hmm. Lemon, let me come to you.
Yes.
And your story is such an inspirational for African youth.
Thank you.
I mean, you have also been the first Ethiopian to be Chancellor at British University.
Yes.
University of Westminster.
University of Manchester.
University of Manchester. Yeah. So what makes you such a strong man?
What makes me a strong person from my childhood to now is my Ethiopian roots. Even before I knew I was from Ethiopia, the strength of being Ethiopian was inside of me. And I spent most of my life searching for my mother, my father, my sisters, my brothers, my aunts and my uncles, and I was stolen from Ethiopia. I had my name changed. I was hidden from my people. And I think it must be the strength of Ethiopia inside me which has led me throughout my life to this place that I'm right now at the Addis Literature Festival 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Your name, Lemon, is an Amharic word to mean why.
It means the question
it's such
why.
a poetic name, isn't it?
It was
Tell us a little bit about your name.
My name was given to me by my mother, who was on her own in England in the late 1960s. And her name is Yemareshet, which is also a beautiful poetic name. And she was from Gondar. And she then came to Addis. She went to the Seventh-day Adventist school just outside of Addis. And then she went to England to study. She found herself pregnant. And then she was placed in this strange institution in England. It must have been very scary for her, very difficult. But she is strong. You know, she was on her own, sent to this strange place. And it was at that place that a social worker stole me from her, changed my name, so he hid my name, named me after himself. You know, illegally. My legal name was always Lemon Sisai, but I did not know that. Yeah, so that's what happened to her, and then I was trafficked in England to foster parents, and then I was placed in children's homes, and then I left them when I was 18 years of age. The same year that Prince Alemayu, son of Theodros, who was stolen and taken to England, the same year that he died is the same year when I was 18 years of age that I left the system. So I was on my own. And from that day of being on my own as an adult, I was given my name, I found my name, my birth certificate. From that day, I began the search for my mother and my father and my sisters and my brothers and my aunts and my uncles and my grandparents. And now I have a nation as family and family as a nation.
Interesting.
I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed.
Thank you for that inspirational story, Lemon. And Gorati, let me come to you. Apparently, you are here to take part in Addis Literature Festival, organized here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So what triggers you to take part and to participate in this festival organized in African soil?
Yeah, first of all, I'm truly honored and happy that I was invited to participate in the first ever Addis Literature Festival, because this is very important. I organize literary festivals myself in Kampala, and for me, a literature festival is that time when writers showcase what we do in isolation. Because as writers, we work alone, we work in isolation, we scratch our heads. I always refer to my writing room as my torture chambers, because when I'm in there, I'm creating, and it is very frustrating. It's a very lonely journey for a writer. So you are creating something, and then if you are lucky, it gets published, but then you need to showcase that. You need a space to showcase what you've been working on, sometimes for years and years and years. And for me, Literature Festival does that it brings writers, it celebrates the word, the written word. It celebrates what writers have been working on in isolation, on a lonely journey, on a very frustrating journey. So it gives them that platform to showcase what we've been working on. So for me, a literature festival is very important, and I just feel honored that I was invited to participate in the first ever Addis Literature Festival.
Obviously, literature is the most powerful tool that we can use to change the world. And in today's world, what we are having is absence of peace and absence of togetherness. We are witnessing, for example, absence of peace in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in many parts of the world. And we are also witnessing a society torn apart. So what could be the role of literature in bringing and maintaining peace and togetherness around the world? Lemon.
Thank you. I've performed, read at literature festivals all over the world, from America to Saudi Arabia, all over Africa and all over Europe over 30 more years. And I've seen how a literature festival can unite a nation, and also it allows for the creativity and expression of the younger generation, the younger generation who are a part of the country, who are writing poetry, who are performing on stage, as they are here in Ethiopia. There's a lot of activity going around. Fendika is a very good example. It's become very famous as a venue, but they've always had poetry. So primarily, a literature festival promotes the idea of creativity within the nation, but also creativity around the world. So we can invite people from around the world to read, and invite the diaspora, and invite the writers inside the country as well. It's a powerful expression of creativity within our communities. And if we look around this country, Ethiopia, look around, I'm in Addis right now. I can see creativity in the buildings that are being built. I can see creativity in the art on the streets, in the churches, in the hotel that I'm staying in. The music, the literature, the paintings, these are all the spirit of the people.
Gorati, Lemon has explained the power of literature, interestingly, very well. How do you evaluate the growth of literature? Is literature growing, improving, or is literature showing kind of downturn, or has it been stunted somewhere?
I think for me, what is happening on the continent for literature at the moment is the most exciting time.
For Africa?
For Africa, because I have been doing my literary activism and my writing, or the promotion of African literature for 30 years now. And I don't think it has ever been like this. I look back at a time when I was at the beginning of my career, when I just published one novel, and I was invited to Germany for a festival, and they took me out of Berlin for a reading, about maybe 2 or 3 hours on the train, and I went with the festival organizer, and we arrived at this venue, and only one person turned up for my reading. So in the audience, there were 3 people. There was myself and the festival organizer and the one person who had turned up. And I remember feeling slightly depressed that I had traveled all the way from Kampala to Berlin, then to this small town, for one person to turn up to hear me read from my work. And at that time, I kept saying, I wish I could be reading my work on the continent, where people who look like me are going to be interested to come to my reading, where people who can pronounce my name or understand my culture or associate with what I'm doing, so they will have an interest in my writing. And for me, looking back more than 30 years now, that this is happening on the African continent, that we are having literary festivals, that we are producing, writing, producing, publishing our own works. This has not happened before. For example, in Nairobi alone, they are hosting 4 literary events, festivals, in the year. So you have festivals happening in Nairobi, happening in Lagos, now Addis, in Kampala, in all over the continent. And as I said before, festivals are very important. And then we have publishers. We have young people, young entrepreneurs investing in publishing and producing works by African writers. So what is happening now for me is unprecedented, because I've not witnessed this, and it is very exciting. This is the best time to be an African writer.
Impressive. We are obviously on digital age.
Yes.
So is digital technology becoming a curse or a blessing for the growth of literature, Lemon?
There are more words passing between more people now than since the beginning of time. So this is a very good time for words. You know, a writer or a herdsman in Ethiopia can send a text that can be received by a man in Brooklyn, in New York. You know, so we are at a very exciting time regarding words and the travel of words between people. I think the digital age is a blessing. It is our responsibility as people who knew what it was like before the digital age to support the digital age in the generation who are coming forward. They are now reading poems from their phones. You know, the digital age is the biggest intervention in the spoken word and the written word that there's ever been. So I think we should embrace it.
Let me stay on you, Lemon. But there are challenges to the growth of literature, and some people argue that digital technology has posed significant challenge to the growth of literature. For example, today's generation stick to technologies, stick to mobile, laptop and other digital apparatus and gadgets, and they don't stick to books. So it is rather negatively impacting and affecting the growth of literature. How do you respond to such arguments?
One of the things that I love about Ethiopia, about Ethiopia and about Africa in particular, but also about Ethiopia, because this is where I come to the most, one of the things I love are the booksellers, the booksellers who stand on the streets with their books, you know, that they can move from one place to another and they sell them. And if you speak to a bookseller, he will know all of the books that are available. And he will be able to talk to you about the literature And he will be able to sell you new books and tell you about new books that are coming out. This is good. But the internet and the digital space is a representation of him. So you can have the bookseller on the corner of the street, which I love, with his tower of books. And you can also have books which are on the internet, which can be read on a screen. You can have both. I think it's a very exciting time. We need to embrace the digital age, but not lose the beauty of the physical book.
You have something to add, Gority, on the challenge of literature these days?
Yes, because we cannot fight technology. Indeed, we should embrace it. For me, it is adding, it is enhancing to the already existing formats of writing and publishing. Because one of the biggest challenges we have on the continent is moving content. How do we move content across the African continent? For example, I'm in Kampala, and Somalia is not far geographically from Kampala. But how do I get a book published in Somalia to Kampala, for example? How do I get a book published in South Sudan, which is not far geographically to Kampala? So for me, the fact that there's a technology to enable that, if I can't get a physical copy, then I can buy it online. Because moving content across the continent is a very challenging issue. Then how do I get books published in Francophone, for example, because of the language barrier? So if those books can be translated, creating another format using technology, and I can access those books in Uganda, and I think I should be embracing that. Ethiopia, for example, how do I get books published in Ethiopia to Uganda? By air, it's just 2 hours. The moment you're in the air, they're announcing you're about to land. So it is that close. But how do I get a book published from Ethiopia? How do I get it to my readers in Uganda? So if online digital publishing is going to enable that, then we should embrace it.
You can't fight technology, but we have to embrace it. And let us talk a little bit about narratives, the power of narratives. We are the product of narratives. We are the product of what we have read in our childhood. We are the product of what we have watched, what we have heard in our childhoods. So I want you to explain a little bit about the power of narratives in creating, shaping and reshaping the narratives of Africa.
You know, there is an African proverb that says, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter.
The hunter.
Yeah, so meaning that if we allow somebody else to tell our stories, somebody with the power of the pen, somebody who has the power to control our narrative, the story will always glorify the hunter, the most powerful person. So if we allow somebody to come to the continent and define our narratives and tell those narratives and write those narratives, they are going to tell it from their perspective. So we have to take control. We have to take back that control and tell our narratives. So for me, what I advocate for is we need to own our narratives at all levels. We need to tell them. In other words, we need to write them. But sometimes it's not what we are writing that is getting published. So because we don't have the power to publish our own narratives, so the publisher is going to choose what they publish. They are going to choose to publish, for example, what we call poverty porn about Africa, so that all the stories that come out are glorifying the poverty on the continent, are glorifying the horrible images of war and disease and ignorance and poverty. That is what the publisher is choosing to publish. Probably they are looking at their market. Probably that's what sells in Europe and the West. But if we can take control of all the production processes of writing, of publishing, of distribution, of marketing, then we are going to control our narratives. Short of that, is going to be controlled for us. And what gets out there is not going to be what we would have wished to be our narrative.
That is so powerful. She said, until the lion starts to speak about itself, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
The hunter, yeah.
Lemon, do you think African writers here in African soil in the diaspora play their part in shaping the correct narratives of Africa, the nuanced picture and stories of Africa?
Well, we must also say that it is happening now.
It's happening.
That we have the Chimamandas, you know, we have the Boketu Seyums, you know, we have the Tigist Mamos, we have the Aidna Mariams in the world speaking truth to power, you know, so taking back the narrative and speaking of our true experiences. You know, so it is happening, and this is why we have literature festivals. This is primarily, you know, it's exactly what Goretti is saying. We are taking back the narrative, and it's the most exciting time for literature in Africa now, you know. And there are literature festivals, like, as was said, in South Africa, in Kampala, in West Africa, in North Africa. It's a very exciting time, actually. I'm really pleased that, you know, Ethiopia is on board with this incredible movement which is flowing across Africa right now.
Goretti, how do you view the relationship between African diaspora to their roots?
In terms of literature?
In terms of literature.
In terms of literature, that's why, for me, I started the African Writers Trust. So this is an organization I founded about 15 years ago now. And what motivated me to start it was I had moved to London. So now I divide my time between Kampala and London. I'd moved to London, and I was very eager to get into the literary spaces and to connect with African writers in the UK and in Europe. So I was participating in a lot of literary events. And then I would meet very many African writers, including Lemen, and I would ask them about the continent, ask them about the writers based on the continent. And soon I realized there was a disconnect between the writers in the diaspora and the writers on the continent, because I'd been working on the continent for 10 years, having founded another women writers organization. So I realized there was that disconnect between the two groups. But for me, the more I talked to these writers, the more I understood that what divided us was geographical space, more than the content that we're writing about. Because reading the books by African writers in the diaspora and reading the books by writers on the continent, one thing that stood out was that we were all drawing from the same epistemology. You know, writers in the diaspora were coming back to the continent for stories. So they were not writing about their experiences of living in the diaspora, but they were coming back to Africa to write about the history of Ethiopia, the history of Uganda, historical novels, and even fiction. So for me, that is important, that even when writers leave the continent, some were born and raised outside the continent, they still want to come back and write about Africa. So that is very important. So the African Writers Trust tries to bridge those geographical spaces by bringing the two groups together to share those experiences, to participate in collaborative learning, because we are learning from each other, you know, to share information, to share experiences and expertise. So for me, that is very important.
All right. Yeah, we are about to finalize our interview. You are distinguished writers, internationally recognized writers, and I want you to close my program with your beautiful literature work. So let me begin from Lemon. And can you read to us a poem which you have written on the Battle of Adwa, a decisive victory where Ethiopia gained a resounding victory over Italian aggressors and colonizers at the Battle of Adwa in 1896?
Thank you. The Battle of Adwa, 1896. Preceding Adwa. Remember this, the Europeans carved up our homes with bloodthirst, not because we were the third world, but because we were the first, because we held gold in our hearts, because we had diamonds for eyes, because oil ran through our veins and a blessing hung in our skies. Remember this, that when they scrambled in the conference in Berlin and callously carved Africa, searing each African's skin, it was not because of their greed or need to sow seeds saturated with sorrow, but because through Africa's greatness they envisioned their own tomorrow, the beginning. Barriateri, the Italian general, had ice instead of eyes and a tongue of 5 leather whips. Ras Alula was deafened by the whisper of lies that seeped from his lips. Through Alula's agents who could read the tone of Ethiopian winds, their whisper, we will catch the Italian advance before the advance begins. And with anger, that of lions, and a swiftness of eagle's wings, Alula rose, magnificent, and rode to the foot of Menelik the king.
Amazing. Goretti, I know you have written so many books, so many novels. Can you share one passage from one of your favorite books?
Okay, I'm going to read from my latest novel, which is entitled Promises.
Yeah.
I'll read at the very beginning. It should have been their wedding day, a simple but formal ceremony at the registry office with 2 witnesses. Then they would settle into their forever after. The white wedding would follow later. They had agreed 3 years back when they had had their traditional Kwanjula ceremony. Instead, Kagawa spent most of the day with a travel agent who was trying to get him a cheaper air ticket to the UK. Ajuna spent hers at home, plowing through a pile of undergraduate essays. The traditional ceremony had depleted their finances, Ajuna's to be precise, because Kagawa was still unemployed. They were now in a desperate situation. They needed to find at least £300 more in 4 days' time for Kagawa's travel. How had they come to this?
What are the main messages conveyed there in your book?
Yeah, so Promises is an immigration story, but with the backdrop is a love story between 2 young people, highly experienced, highly ambitious. One is the woman, Ajuna, is a university lecturer, and her fiancé, Kagawa, has a master's degree in economics, but has failed to find a job 3 years after graduating. And he decides to leave the country for the UK for greener pastures, or in the hope that he'll find a job and better prospects. And then he can return to Uganda and marry his fiancée, Ajuna. So the story is really what happens in between. When Kagawa expatriates himself to the UK, and his fiancée, Ajuna, remains in Kampala lecturing at the university with their daughter. So it's what happens in between that.
Brilliant. Thank you both of you for making time to conduct this beautiful interview, and thank you for sharing your golden perspectives and insights on the whole idea circumnavigates around literature and the impact of literature in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of my interview. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Many thanks for watching, and bye for now.